There was one other thing that I wanted to address, if you have the energy for it,
Sure.
that we talked about earlier, to switch gears
Kuzma.
completely. Yeah, Kuzma versus Ingram.
My God.
Kuzma versus Ingram.
Where do I begin with Kuz?
Yeah, well, where do you begin? I mean,
think
we can talk about their production for this year.
Well, obviously, Brandon Ingram has had a breakout season.
Yep.
Shout
out the podcast.
He is the focal point of the offense, so he's been given more opportunities to succeed, no doubt about that. Kuzma, on the other hand, has regressed, and I give him some benefit of the doubt because he doesn't have the opportunities that maybe he had last year. But what bothers me about Kuzma is not that he's not scoring like 25 points a game to the extent that Ingram is that he's making consistent mistakes and still not playing any defense. That's always been my issue with him. If he came out and averaged 14, 15 points off the bench, played solid defense, and wasn't a liability out there in crucial game moments, I'd be okay with it. I would ideally like to see improvement because I would hope he can fulfill that Lou Williams role that the Clippers have as like their third.
We need a third star. We
exactly.
We need somebody
right.
to step into that role of the consistent third wheel.
And ideally that's what I was expecting from Kuzma.
Right.
But my issue with him is mistakes. That's my issue. I get frustrated watching a game and watching people not box out, watching people not switch on screens, watching people not watch the back cuts and just letting their offense
or
the
just like
defender.
that fake contest. Do you notice that fake where they don't even jump? They just kind of put their hand up.
It's fake
that's
hustle.
That's a layup for NBA. Exactly.
It's fake hustle.
That's a layup for NBA players,
because
man.
that's basically not a contest, right?
Exactly.
You got to actually have the threat of the shot being blocked for them to alter their shot, right?
Exactly.
So those are my issues with Kuzma. What do you think?
So I agree with you 100%, and I think defense comes down to effort a lot of the times, and I just don't see a consistent effort from him on the defensive end. I am more inclined to be more lenient with him on the offensive end this season because of a number of factors that I can get into, but I don't really care too much about his offense because we have enough offensive potency to win basketball games.
Right.
Defense wins championships, dog. And at the beginning of this season, we were ranked the number 1 defensive team in the league. Since Avery Bradley has gone down, we've gone down to number 7 in the NBA in terms of defensive efficiency. And that Avery Bradley going down has also coincided with Kuzma coming back into the lineup. And I think just given the eye test, things like not boxing out, things like not closing out on shooters, not switching on screens effectively. These are all things that I've noticed, and again, that comes down to effort. So I question his effort. I think Kuzma, at this point in his career, and obviously he's extremely young, and this is something that can be improved upon going forward. I think if he's not popping offensively, if he's not having a good game where he's getting a bunch of shots, he's making shots, I think he's more likely to not be engaged defensively.
Right. Yep.
And I think that's a problem. Whereas with someone like Anthony Davis, whether his shot is falling or not, you're never going to question his defensive intensity and effort that he puts in on that side of the floor. And I think that's I think that of everything is the biggest area of improvement that I need to see from Kyle Kuzma going forward. So having said that,
so why isn't he good? Why isn't he a good defensive player? He's long. He's athletic.
Comes down to effort. That's
a simple fix. Then that's frustrating.
Agreed. We could say that about Carmelo Anthony for his entire career.
Yeah, but Carmelo was not the athlete that LeBron was or Wade was.
You don't have to be that kind of athlete. Do you think Patrick Beverley is anywhere near athletic as any of those people we just mentioned? It comes down to effort, man. At the end of the day,
he's pretty athletic.
You can be everyone in the NBA is at least somewhat athletic, but in terms, comparing Beverley to those people that we just mentioned, right. I think there's a huge chasm, right. and what makes up for that is the effort. And I think Kuzma has just been really inconsistent on that end of the floor. On the other end of the floor, in terms of offense is concerned, and to go back to our initial debate that we were having earlier during the game about Brandon Ingram versus Kyle Kuzma, I think a lot of factors outside of Kuzma's control have contributed to him seemingly regressing, whereas Ingram has broken out. Number one, Kyle Kuzma started the year injured. He didn't play basketball since August and was just coming in to the game just like a week ago or a week and a half ago, right? So I think there's something to be said for that rust factor. If you remember last year, and what I was saying, just to kind of get everybody up to speed who might be listening that didn't hear this conversation that we had earlier, I was saying how it's really difficult for me to tell between Kuzma and Ingram who has a higher ceiling. And part of that is because they averaged identical numbers last year. Identical. And it's just been, there's certain games where Kuzma looks way more of a complete
more
player.
polished.
Way more polished. He's shooting jump hooks.
He's always looked more polished.
But Ingram has the length that you can't teach. He's better around the rim,
but
potentially.
He's younger.
He's young. He's 2 years younger for sure.
3 years younger.
For whatever. 100%. That's definitely a factor, right? But having said that, there's a lot of stuff working in Ingram's favor right now, and there's a lot of stuff working against Kyle Kuzma. Primarily, Kuzma coming off of injury. He missed the beginning of the season. Mm-hmm. His role is significantly diminished as opposed to last year. Not only does he have LeBron taking up a huge chunk of the offense, but now Anthony Davis, they added another superstar. He's coming off the bench, whereas last year he started a lot of games. Versus Brandon Ingram, who is not only in a starting role, but the focal point of that team hasn't played the entire year, which is Zion Williamson, who theoretically would have been the focal point. So Ingram, and he's been healthy the entire time, give or take a few games. I think he missed a few this year. But in any case, Brandon Ingram has had the opportunity and the health to dominate. I think if the roles were reversed and Ingram was on the Lakers, injured to start the season, and Kuzma was on the Pelicans, healthy to start the season, you would see similar productivity for Kuzma as you see with Ingram, given the situation that he's currently in. Those factors, exactly.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying, and you bring up really good points across the board. And I don't really have an issue with any of your points. If you want to go into the debate who has a higher ceiling between Ingram and Kuzma, I think it's debatable, although you got to give Ingram the edge because statistically he's had a breakout season. Shout out podcast.
Boom.
And
we should take a shot every time we say breakout season during the podcast.
Yeah, and you know, and then but my issue with Kuzma is I'm not holding him to the Ingram pedestal. I'm not expecting him to have the performance that Ingram is having. I just want to see effort defensively. I want him not to be a liability. I want him not to make key mistakes. He's like the anti-Caruso. I know this is silly, but when Caruso's out there, he's like the quintessential role player. He knows what to do. He knows what he's got to do. He makes timely plays. And I think Kuzma needs to channel a little bit of that. Now, going back to the scoring, there's been plenty of examples throughout NBA history where there's been a third scoring option scoring 18 plus points per game. I envision Kuzma to have that role, and those were my expectations for him, and he hasn't lived up to that. In addition to the lack of defensive effort and the mistakes that he's making, it's almost to the point where does the cons outweigh the pros? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like, well, is it worth the 13 points on the fairly poor field goal percentage that we have all these defensive lapses and, you know, weird turnovers where he's like throwing the ball down court?
But the frustrating thing is just as he was seemingly getting kind of his rhythm back and getting that stride, he gets poked in the eye super hard, has to come out of that game in the first half, and then comes back with the goggles on and just totally out of sorts.
Right. Obviously
not himself. So I think the jury is still out on him. I agree with everything you're saying 100%. I just am not ready to, you know, kind of write him off as that third option that you're speaking of just because of all of these factors are playing against him so far.
I'm not either. I'm just saying I'm a little disappointed to start.
Yeah, you know, 100%. But at the same time, how disappointed can you be? The Lakers are the number one team in the NBA right now.